You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Hey everyone, it's Paige, your favorite nutrition podcaster and dietitian. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. This podcast relies on the support of listeners like you and needs donations to keep this project running. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at pagesmothersrd.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Paige Smathers RD if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening. Hi everyone, it's Paige. Welcome back to another episode of Nutrition Matters Podcast. And I'm excited to share this one with you because this is actually one of the very first podcasts I ever recorded. So as most of you know at this point, what I've done is I have kind of deleted the first few episodes of the podcast and I'm republishing a few of my favorites, and this is one of them. So I do one episode per month is an old episode that I recorded, anywhere from 2 to 3 years ago. So this one's with Reba Sloan, and I'm going to introduce her in the actual episode so you'll get to know her there. And before we get into talking about her story and her path to becoming a dietitian and her experience with struggling with an eating disorder, I just want to make sure that you know about a few resources available to you. The first is the Nutrition Matters Podcast group on Facebook, and it's just a community where we share little tidbits from the episodes and where we discuss things and maybe vent a little bit too. So that's a fun place to get in touch with some like-minded people if you'd like to join us there. Another one is my online course, which you can access at pagesmothersrd.com/course. This is a 10-week online course that's really engineered for people who are wanting to learn how to just kind of eat in a healthful, happy, relaxed way, but not feel like they need to diet. And a lot of people struggle where they feel like if they're eating healthy, then they're on a diet, or if they're off of that diet, then they're going hog wild, and they don't really know how to find this gentle balance, both on behavior-wise, but also sometimes even mentally. How do you approach food in a healthy way? So this course really walks you through the steps of how to do that, and it's a lot of fun. I love it, and I'm getting great response from the course members, and we've almost hit a year of it being published and available. So that's kind of fun. So feel free to check that out, pagesmothersrd.com/course. And one other thing that I want to mention is up until this point, I haven't really advertised that I work with people for long distance nutrition coaching. But at this point, I feel good about announcing that I actually have the capability of taking a few more long distance coaching clients on. So if you're interested in that, if that seems like a good fit, or if you've been wanting to find someone and you like the approach that I take, head on over to my website and fill out the application to become a long distance coaching client. You can find that pagesmothersrd.com/individuals, or you can just navigate there by going to the website, hovering over services and clicking on individuals, and then you'll see an application on that page. This application is really just so that I can get to know you a little bit and make sure we're a good fit. I always will give you a call and just make sure that we're chatting a little bit ahead of time to make sure that you don't have an active eating disorder, and that my services would be a good fit for what you're looking for. So if that interests you, go ahead and check that out, and we will be in touch. Okay, with that, I think that's about everything I wanted to say. Let's get into my interview with Reba Sloan, who is just a delightful, fabulous, spunky, wonderful dietitian. You're going to love her. Reba Sloan is a registered dietitian and nutrition therapist in private practice. She received a BS in dietetics from Harding University and a Master of Public Health degree with a behavioral counseling emphasis from Loma Linda University. Reba completed her dietetic internship at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. A fellow of the Academy for Eating Disorders, Reba has been in private practice for over 25 years in Nashville, Tennessee. She has been the recipient of the SCAN Excellence in Practice Award for the treatment of eating disorders. She provides nutrition counseling for those suffering from eating disorders and disordered eating. In addition to her private practice, Reba is a much requested speaker for local, national, and international professional organizations on topics related to eating disorders. She is one of two founding members of the Eating Disorders Coalition of Tennessee. She served on the board of directors for 6 years. She served as treasurer, president-elect, and president of this nonprofit organization dedicated to offering hope, help, and healing to all those impacted by eating disorders and disordered eating. She continues to volunteer for the EDCT. She's authored many articles on disordered eating and eating disorders, and many of those can be accessed through her website, which is rebasloannutrition.com. So, Reba, can you say hello?
Well, I'm very glad to be with you today, Paige. I'm glad you're providing this information for people.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise. We're so lucky to have you here. Is there anything I missed in the introduction or anything else that you would like to add?
I think you got it all. That was rather lengthy. And I guess when you've been around a long time, those introductions get a little bit longer.
That's very true. Well, you have just such a wide array of experience and expertise, and this is just so needed. And I'm just really excited to have you share your story kind of personally and professionally with us. So are you ready to just get into it?
I am ready.
Okay, great. So I heard your story a little bit at the Center for Change conference that we both were at the beginning of this year, 2015. Yes. And so I know a little bit about your childhood and young adult experience with an eating disorder. And I just want to hear more about how what that experience was like for you and how that shaped who you are both personally and professionally today.
Sure. And I really believe I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today had I not gone through that experience. And I'm, in an odd way, very grateful for it. I grew up overweight initially and was what we would call today bullied. And at age 13, and this was in the 1960s, you have to remember, I decided to go on my first diet. Along came Twiggy about then, and some people out listening to this will know who Twiggy is, others won't. You can Google it. But she was the first model in our recent history that told women that they needed to look like stick figures. So a lot of things were changing in the 60s, and we thought everything from Britain was great. That's when we had the British music invasion. And I have to say that I believe Twiggy really impacted the pursuit of thinness. If you look at the history of dieting, actually, all the research will show that there was started to be an increase in dieting around that time, and so with me as well. So I started out with what I thought might be a healthy way to pursue weight loss, and initially everyone was very glad. My doctor, my parents had all been on me about my weight, and so my mom proudly fixed my first diet meal for me. It was a hamburger patty with green beans cooked in water, not with her traditional pork fat that she usually cooked with, and a little mustard on the side for flavor. And as I ate it, it's like I'm eating it right today. I remember feeling like this is going to do it. This is going to be the ticket to me getting my weight off. And no one who starts dieting ever believes that an eating disorder would kidnap their brain. But we know dietary restriction opens the door as one of the ingredients, I would say, to the development of an eating disorder. I was 13. We also know that two of the prime times for eating disorders to develop are 13, 14-ish, and then again that first year of college or the last year of high school, 17, 18-ish. So I was right on time. I was in the right culture, right subculture. And I began, back then girls didn't exercise, and we were supposed to have PE every day, which I begged out of as an overweight kid because it felt awkward and I was embarrassed. So what I did is I paced in the basement. One of my young clients just recently was telling me that she paces, and I thought, wow, and she was the age that I was when I developed my eating disorder. I thought nowadays they just went out and went to go for a run, but she paces as well. So I'd go in my basement and I would pace for hours, and my parents thought I was studying. One thing that eating disorders really can do is to make you be very secretive and dishonest. I tell the parents I work with, your child is not a dishonest person, but an eating disorder, once it kidnaps the brain, can certainly lead you to be very secretive and lie about things that you could have put a gun to my head and told me to lie to my parents and about something else I would never would have. But as far as the eating disorder issues, yes, I would tell them I'd eaten when I hadn't. I learned all the tricks. That's why I tell my clients that you might as well be honest with me, because I pretty much know all the tricks. So they actually thought I was eating and did not know about the pacing. I lost over half my body weight in a matter of a few months. They thought something might be wrong with me organically because, of course, they thought I was eating. And so I had a doctor back then who was a jack-of-all-trade doctor. He delivered me. He was also my grandparents' doctor, my parents' doctor, my pediatrician, and he was sort of like a second father. So his idea was we just need to go to Mayo Clinic. Let's just go right to Mayo Clinic. Well, come to find out, actually at that time they were studying eating disorders and doing research at Mayo Clinic, but the people I came across there certainly did not know anything about eating disorders. So they ran all the tests, wanted to make sure that I didn't have cancer or some catabolic disease that was causing me to lose weight. I met up with a psychiatrist who looked at me as I was nearly bald and said, I know your problem. You get mad at your parents and you pull your hair out. When in fact, of course, I was losing my hair because I was starved. Ended up in a hospital, and this is where my life really took a change. I was on the pediatrics ward. They didn't know anything about eating disorders there either, and they didn't know to watch me. And I was getting by with all kinds of things, throwing away food and whatnot, telling the nurse techs I'd help them make beds so I could get some exercise. But I met a dietitian who, my perception now looking back, she must have just been out of an internship, maybe 2 years out of college. And her name was Schultze, and I think you heard that name at Center for Change when we were talking about all that. And she was frustrated with me because, of course, I wasn't restoring any weight, and I was a typical 13-year-old that I knew everything. So one day she came into me, and I was at the hospital for 6 weeks, believe it or not, no therapy, nothing but just them trying to make me eat. I should have had a nasogastric tube, but that was not common knowledge back then. So she came in one day, and she said, you think you know everything because you know how to count calories. And of course, I said, yeah, I do. I know everything. And she said, well, we're going to find out what you don't know. And the next day, she brings me in college-level textbooks on nutrition, human anatomy, physiology, and I don't even remember what else, but I do remember those two. I'm 13. I really didn't understand much in it and didn't really want to. But as she walked out of my room, she looked at me and she said, you might as well decide right now to become a registered dietitian because you're going to like this. Well, I did not know what a registered dietitian was, but in that instant, that was what I decided. And at age 13, I made that decision. I never looked back. It took me a good, I would say, 6-7 years to get over my eating disorder. But I'm grateful for what it taught me. It taught me empathy for people. It certainly has given me insight into the way the eating disorder brain works. I feel like that helps me when I work with clients. And I am very willing to share my history with my clients when I think it's appropriate. Very often I find adolescents and teenagers may need to know my history earlier than college students or adults, because they come in there under duress. And once they know that, wow, I've been in the same prison as you're in right now, and I start talking to them about what might be going on in their head, and they look at me like, wait, how are you reading my mind? Well, it's because I've been in the same prison. So that's really the pivotal point in my career. I wouldn't have done anything else. I may not have even gone to college, to tell you the truth, had it not been for my experience with the eating disorder.
So age 13, you knew what you wanted to do for the rest of your life.
Never looked back, never changed it for an instant, never even considered any other option.
Wow, you know what? That is actually my story too. Not exactly with the eating disorder side of it, but I decided at age, I think 14, that I was going to become a dietitian, and I thought, I might change my mind, but I never did either. So there we go.
It's rare, I know.
I know, kind of funny.
Most people go to college not even having a thought exactly what they want to study, but it's I think that helped me decide right away. And so my first day of registration at Harding, I met my advisor. She's still there, Dr. Beth Wilson, and she was very happy that I already knew what I wanted to do, and she was definitely one of those people that I believe personally God put in my life to help me along the way that didn't really know anything about eating disorders, but just knew ways to support and encourage me. And I dove right in, of course, into the studies, and she told me the first day she met me that I needed to shoot for a 4.0 to get an internship.
That's
so
great.
I took her seriously and dove right in.
Well, I want to hear more about that, and specifically, I know for me, and let me just share a little bit about me to kind of relate why I'm asking this question. I became interested in nutrition because all these people around me were telling me, don't eat that, do eat this, don't eat that. And I was really involved in athletics and took that very seriously and wanted to perform the best that I could. And I just wanted to know what the heck was true. I just found myself thinking, maybe I'll study and I'll really learn what's true. And of course there was an element of maybe if I really learn the perfect way to eat, I'll never have to worry about my weight. Fears of body image related to it. So
I don't think you can live in our culture and be a female and
exactly.
not have some of those thoughts.
Yeah. So what I found is when I went away to college and studied nutrition, I expected to become more strict and more militant about what I eat and what I don't eat. But what I found is I learned to relax, and we can talk more about that. I learned more to be intuitive and to trust myself, and it was the best thing I could have ever done for my relationship with food. So by the time, let's say you said 6 years, so by the time you were entering college, you were kind of maybe on the lull, but you were maybe still working through things. End. So tell us about that and about what learning about nutrition, studying the real science of it, what did that do to change your perspective on food or body image or anything else related to that?
Well, I tell all my clients that they have a truth channel. And in the tug of war, you've got your truth channel, and maybe the other channel we could either call the eating disorder channel or, quite frankly, the diet mentality channel. And as I became more and more educated about the real science of what our body needs, how our body metabolizes proteins, carbs, fats, I became more and more convinced that I could be more flexible with my choices. And I would say what happened was my truth channel became louder and louder and would override anything that would come from the disordered eating diet mentality channel. And so that was, that really contributed hugely. Now I know that it can go the other way.
Right, definitely.
One of my last clients I had to send to residential actually was a registered dietitian, and had been battling. She's 28. She'd been battling her eating disorder since she was 13, 14, and has at 28 has already been to multiple residential treatment facilities. So her experience was that it kind of magnified her OCD-ish thoughts. And when you remember those classes where you have to track what you eat and calculate the amount of protein, carbs, fats, calories, and all of that, well, she already had OCD. So her study of nutrition actually exacerbated her eating disorder.
Yeah, and that definitely happens.
She has decided she has to get out of the field. And so it's sad, but I believe she's right. I just don't believe she could continue in the field and really get better.
Well, thanks for sharing that perspective, because there's definitely, it depends on personalities, and, if anyone listening is struggling with an eating disorder and thinks, oh, all I have to do is go study nutrition in college and I'll be cured, not necessarily. So really good point. Thank you for bringing that up and sharing that. Okay, so I want to hear a little bit more about, just with all of your extensive experience with eating disorders, both, in your own life and also professionally, what is your own personal food philosophy?
Well, to quote the late and great Julia Childs, I would say moderation in everything, including moderation.
Oh, I love that.
One of my most popular blogs is a blog that I compared Julia Child's philosophy versus Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz states everywhere you can look that he thinks eating should be joyless and automated, and that is a direct quote. And you can think about how awful of a life that is. And Julia Childs, she cooked with real butter, real cream. She lived to be 90, and I love that. Just moderation in all things, including moderation, because you can take anything to the extreme. And one of my favorite oxymorons is structured flexibility. So, as you were mentioning, your interest that triggered by hearing all this, don't eat that, good food, bad food. And, of course, athletes, I think, are subjected to so many myths and false hopes and promises. So that's one of the reasons they can be particularly high risk for an eating disorder. So I tell my clients, of course, when they come in, they're like, well, does it mean when I get over my eating disorder that I'm going to be fat? Because they have that all or nothing thinking.
Right.
And what does it look like? What do I have to eat X, Y, or Z? And so, of course, you have to deal with all the food fears. But in the beginning, I just tell them, you know what? I agree there are people in our culture maybe that are too flexible, maybe too thoughtless about what they're eating, why they're eating, when they're eating. But even though we've been told the way to correct that is to diet and get rigid and exclude foods and get, really limited, that's actually an overcorrection. And that there are people that, and when they do that, they end up over here on the other side where they're really way too structured, way too rigid. Even people that we would not be able to say fully would classify for having an eating disorder, the orthorexia, which I'm seeing so much more of.
So will you just define that for us, for those who might be listening who don't know what that means?
It's the pursuit of the perfect way to eat.
So that's orthorexia, just so that we can clarify.
And actually there's a great website, orthorexia.com, that is dedicated to talking about it. And I think Jenny Schaefer's book, Almost Anorexic, is a great book that talks about how you can get so rigid that maybe you wouldn't technically be called anorexic, but your mind is certainly in that
I see
rigid
that
way.
so much in my work.
Well, I passed by Panera Bread the other day, and in their window they had the sign, "Eat clean." And quite honestly, I want to pick a brick up and throw it right through the window. It's just so infuriating. And so a lot of things, we're put the people on the other side, but we're told that in our culture. So structured flexibility is another way I describe my philosophy, being thoughtful and aware, but not obsessive and not anxious. And that's an interesting little tap dance sometimes, but I think that's when you make true peace.
Great. And I'll link to that blog post you mentioned, and I'll search for it on your site and link to that.
It seemed to be, it really hit home with a lot of people, seemingly. And
that's great.
So it's an interesting comparison.
Okay, so you're saying you kind of live a life of structured flexibility with your eating. All foods can fit, moderation in all things, including moderation. I love that. Great. So I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you, is there hope for someone with an eating disorder? And I think I know what the answer is. And then with that, I want to hear a positive recovery story that you're aware of or that you were a part of.
Okay. Well, I am very grateful that I've been a part of many people fully recovering. And it takes a team and a lot of hard work. But yes, I do believe in full recovery. And as we said a moment ago, does that mean that I believe a person who's had an eating disorder would get to the point where they never, ever have an irrational thought about food, eating, weight, or exercise? No.
And that's an important distinction because eating disorders typically happen in people who are very perfectionist, all or nothing, black and white thinkers. So sometimes in the recovery process, it's, well, I need to be perfect at recovery. So I really like that distinction. That's really important for people to hear.
And I do think that once you've ever had an eating disorder, I think you have to really guard against any type of restriction. I even tell people, if you're going to have dental surgery, you have got to have a plan. And I take it seriously. I'm 60 years old. I haven't been in that prison since I was 19 or 20. But I make sure that even if I'm not feeling well, that I eat something. If I have a surgery, I make sure I have Smoothie King or a shake or something. So I believe in full recovery. Now, I also know about relapse, and I've unfortunately seen that in many, many of my clients. And I think one of the most important parts of recovery is planning for relapse. And I tell my clients, I want to get you to the point where if you have a spike in an eating disorder or diet mentality thought, that your truth channel is so strong that you can confront it and it does not lead to an eating disorder or a dieting action. So that's how I view recovery. It's quite a journey. I guess probably my most exciting and perhaps well-known story of one of my clients who fully recovered is Jenny Schaefer. And I'm not betraying any confidentiality. It's in the foreword of Life Without Ed, which I believe is an excellent book for anyone who's struggling with
it's the book, pretty much.
Yeah, it's great. And Jenny has written 3 books on eating disorder recovery. She is, 33, 34. I met Jenny when she was a 19-year-old freshman at Belmont University. Jenny had, and if you've read her works, you know just about every version of an eating disorder possible. And when we run into each other at conferences, she still comes up and apologizes for the times when she screamed, "I hate you." Oh. And I'm like, you remember, that was just your eating disorder, Jenny. And she still carries around one of the blank food records. So when she gives presentations, that's one of her props. I'm like, yeah, and it usually was blank, Jenny. So some things haven't changed. But I'm so proud of her, and what an ambassador for eating disorder recovery and hope. And
I didn't realize you were her dietitian. That is amazing.
Yeah,
What a cool
and
circle.
it's just, I love it. And, we just, she's done so much to support the Eating Disorders Coalition of Tennessee. And, she's a singer-songwriter now, happily married. I guess this will be her second year of marriage she's going into this fall. And then the other one is the guy you met there at Center for Change, Andrew Wallen, who now has fully recovered from his eating disorder and has his own treatment facility and helps others. And I would say in Nashville alone, at least 5 or 6 of some of the best therapists in Nashville I treated when they were struggling. And I believe their struggle is part of why they're such great therapists. So I have many, thankfully, many positive recovery stories. And it's always wonderful to see that. Sometimes out of the blue, I'll get a note from someone that I haven't seen in a couple of years that will just, something happened in their life that made them grateful for where they're at in their recovery, and they'll send a note. And it makes all the hard, long days worth it when you get notes like that, because there can be a pretty high rate of burnout in eating disorder treatment because it's not an easy population to deal with.
Absolutely.
And
so hug your dietitian.
Pardon me?
So hug your dietitian.
That's right. Give your dietitian a hug. She works hard for you. And sometimes we have to be the bad guys,
Totally.
I just got an email from one of my college students who's going to land back in town here in a week or two. And her mom, we arranged for her mom would check weights while she was home for the summer, weighed her backwards, but would email me updates. Well, her weight's slipping. And I had to be the bad guy and say, no, you don't get to exercise in the next few weeks until I see you. And yes, you do have to go back on a supplement. She was not happy with me. But I always tell my clients, just like Jenny yelled, I hate you. I would rather make someone mad. I would rather them scream, I hate you, than to attend their funeral. Oh. And the other side of treatment of eating disorders, I have had clients who've died. And when you're treating something that has a 20 to 30% death rate, and you've been doing it now, I'm closer to 30 years, it's such an awful, horrible thing, but more than likely you'll see it happen if you've been in practice that long.
Right. And that's the truth. That's the true side of it.
It's just the truth. And I tell my clients, I'm like, I can't scare you out of your eating disorder. I don't want to try to do that. But you do need to look at the facts. And you do need to understand your enemy. And your enemy wants to kill you. And if your enemy, Ed, can't kill you, he just wants to rob you blind and take away relationships, careers, health. And so it's my passion comes from wanting to see everybody get out of prison. And not only do I not want to see them die from their eating disorder, I want to see them thrive and really experience life.
That's beautiful. Oh, I can just, you've done amazing work. I'm so glad that you exist and that you're in this world. It's just amazing. So thank you for everything you do. Let me just ask you a couple more questions.
Sure.
I want to know what you think are some of the most common misconceptions about eating disorders in general. I have a few in mind, but I want to hear your thoughts.
We probably have some of the same ones. Well, one is that people are just doing it to get attention. They choose it. They could just stop. I still have a letter that Mayo Clinic sent home to my doc when I left, and it said, she needs to just go home and eat. If only it were that simple. Or for someone struggling with bulimia, well, you just need to stop doing that. So it is not something someone chooses. It is not something that someone can just say, okay, starting tomorrow, it's not going to be part of my life.
So along with that, how do you help people stop those behaviors or start doing different ones? Along with that question.
Well, that's that whole treatment team, and people have to understand that full recovery from an eating disorder can be a 2 to 5 to 10 year journey, depending on what research you read. And that involves everything from restoring your body and mind, from nutrition rehabilitation, to doing what I call the underground work with a therapist.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful to have 3 or 4 really incredible therapists that I work with in town. I would never dream of treating eating disorders by myself.
Yeah, that's
it's just, you got to have that. And then, unfortunately, I just have to say the weak link, at least in Nashville, and I think perhaps in other areas of the country, we do not have many doctors that understand eating disorders. And they have a lot of misconceptions. If you just could go home and eat and just gain a little weight, everything's going to be okay. Or you know that throwing up hurts you. You need to stop. And some of the things they say to my clients are just outrageous. Some of the comments. So those are definitely some of the things that I think are misconceptions. And it's not. Eating disorders are not just about food, eating, weight. They are not about vanity. They are complex, and they're biosocial, combinations. It's a whole big picture, and you got to hit it from all angles. And probably the greatest area of research I would say right now going on is in the whole area of genetics. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a lot of people in your family that have eating disorders, but if you look, maybe you have people in your family that have OCD or anxiety or depression. You have to have the right brain chemistry to even get an eating disorder. You have to have fertile soil, so to speak. So the genetic component is very interesting.
Definitely. I would add a couple. So I would add, one misconception is that if you have an eating disorder, you need to look emaciated.
Well, I'm very glad, the DSM-5 has even redefined what anorexia is called. And we can now actually give somebody who's overweight with an anorexic mind the diagnostic code of anorexia.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Most people with eating disorders are normal weight or above, and you're so right. When you're not wearing your eating disorder, when you're not skeletal, unfortunately, those are the people that can have higher rates of death because they fly under the radar. And so that's an incredibly important point. You do not have to be skeletal to get an eating disorder. In fact, the majority of people who struggle are normal weight and above.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then the other thing I would add, and this is one I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm hoping to get on some more guests on the podcast to speak to this point, but another very strong misconception is that this is just a female issue.
Oh yeah, well, there's Andrew. Andrew would be a great person.
I've actually asked him, and he's agreed. So we haven't set a date, but he will be on. He will be on. So
I'm actually treating more males now than ever, and I don't know if it's just they feel a little more comfortable talking about it. There's certainly, if you think about wrestling, if a girl was participating in the same things that a wrestler participates in to make weight, we would call it an eating disorder.
Yes.
But with wrestlers, they're wrestlers. So, yeah, they spit in a bucket until they, it's just...
they sleep with no clothes on and their window open when it's 10 degrees outside.
take a
That's
stationary
fine.
bike and ride it in the sauna. I mean, so I do think that's important to note. And many of my male clients, the younger ones tend to be more OCD-ish. The older ones tend to have binge eating disorder.
Interesting.
And just in my practice, a lot of the younger ones who I'd say from age 12 to 16, 17, it's interesting if they can get their OCD taken care of, how much it does help with the eating disorder, and most of them tend to have a little bit more restrictive eating disorders. And then I would say college age and older, I tend to see a little more bulimics and binge eating disorder.
Yes, I just feel very strongly that I want this to be a space where everyone can feel comfortable. So I don't want a man who might be
Absolutely.
listening to this think, "Oh, well, that's a podcast about an eating disorder, so I can't listen to it." I want the men out there who are struggling to know that they are not alone. Absolutely, 100%.
Mm-mm.
This is not a
No.
female issue only.
No,
So,
no, it is not, and it's not just a white girl's issue. You
yes.
know, I have many African American, Native American, Hispanic clients, and sometimes they do feel like, wow, I shouldn't be struggling with this,
Right.
because
That's a
they
great
have
point.
bought into the myth that, well, people of color don't get eating disorders. Yes, they do.
Oh, thank you for that.
So I'm
So,
always proud of somebody who reaches out when it's been hammered into them that they shouldn't be struggling with something like that.
yeah, wow, great points. I love that. Okay. I want to know from your perspective, and this is a really difficult issue and difficult question, but what do you think the line is between healthy eating and an eating disorder? Because you
Hmm.
shared that you felt like when you were around 13 started off with healthy behaviors and healthy intentions, and I think this is a very
Hmm.
common story
Hmm.
that slowly started to get out of control, whether it's, praise from friends or family, you look so great, and then that just encourages you to keep going. But what's the line? How does someone know, whoa, I think I might have a problem here?
Now, if you can find a bookstore that's still open, which we don't have too many left in Nashville, or if you go to Amazon, if you look at all the books on food, eating, nutrition, I mean, your head will spin. This one says eat this, but don't eat that. And I mean, it's just, and people get so confused. And then now with so many venues to get misinformation,
I.e., social
everything
media.
social, i.e. social media, there's a lot of confusion. But if you look at what's recommended, you'll see fewer processed foods, not zero, fewer. Push the fiber content in the diet. Consume more fruits and veggies so you can get those antioxidants. Lean proteins. Monitor the amount and type of fat in your diet, and be active. There are no rules. So when what you're working on to try to be healthier starts kicking out a whole category of food, like carbs, they're the ones that we pick on the most these days, or fats, or this gluten-free craze. I have clients with celiac disease. Believe me, you will know if you need to be gluten-free. That is not, we think following some of those rules will make us healthy, but it's disordered. So I would say when you start feeling like what you're pursuing to be healthy is limiting your socializing, like maybe you think, well, I don't want to go to that birthday party because I know they'll have birthday cake. Or, oh, they're going to have a pizza party tomorrow night, and I'm afraid of pizza. When you start being confined, I'm sorry, my cat's meowing, by those rules, so that they start hindering your quality of life, it's no longer healthy. And if you're pursuing something to be healthy that you can't
Definitely.
live with for the rest of your life, it's worthless. So,
Can you still hear me?
yes. So, I would say the rules, when it goes from goals and guidelines to rigid rules, you know you've gone too far. I think when your goals to be healthy become rules versus guidelines, and they start hindering your quality of life, that's when you know you've crossed over into some disordered eating versus just trying to be healthy.
Okay.
There should be no rules. You should be able. I tell my clients, understanding your body balances things out. If you ate fast food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner one day, that is not going to make you and it's not going to make you unhealthy. If you eat fast food every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, okay, maybe we might have an issue there. But it's understanding that structured flexibility concept and not be governed by any kind of rule.
That's a wonderful answer to that question, and I think really a helpful litmus test for people to take home with them. So along those lines, how do you think parents, loved ones who kind of suspect or are worried about someone in their life in regards to an eating disorder, how can they model healthy eating behaviors as well as a healthy relationship with food? And I also want to kind of qualify that. Maybe people who are worried about their kids or loved ones, but then also people who just want to help prevent or help kind of give their kids the best odds of developing a healthy relationship with food.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a really good question, because a lot more than, that old saying, genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And there's a lot that goes into the development of eating disorders other than just genetics. So a mother might have had an eating disorder and at one point in her life, and of course she can pass that genetic propensity on to her daughter or son. But the way she talks about herself or the way she talks about food, kids watch and they listen. And certainly when you start making comments about someone's appearance or do you really think you should eat that, it can lead to some disordered behaviors. I'm a big fan of Ellen Satter.
Yes, me too. And I will link to her website.
Yes, I think she has some wonderful, especially the one about how to get your kid to eat but not too much. She starts from cradle to college and talks about what are some suggestions that you can do to help your child have a balanced relationship with food and eating and activity and body image. So I think watching what you say as well as what you do, and just kind of keeping your radar on for that. And many times as a child is developing disordered eating or eating disorders, you can actually hear a change in their dialogue, not only with themselves, but maybe about food and eating. Before they've had any real behaviors kick in, if they start saying, well, I can't eat at that restaurant because all their food's fattening, or if they start going online and looking up the menu before they go to a restaurant so they can determine exactly what they need to choose. The earlier we can catch those thoughts and behaviors, the better. So when a parent brings a child into me, this has happened several times in the last few weeks, who just has started showing, a few little signs here and there, or they're involved in a high-risk activity like dance or gymnastics, and they're noticing that their child's talking more about their body compared to their friends. And I would rather put the fire out with a big old fire hose and a squirt gun. I'm a big fan for, if you want to call it over-treating, I'd rather them bring their child in and say, well, let's just talk about sports nutrition, and or can you help little Johnny or little Susie understand what they need nutritionally for their body to work effectively and to grow. And so I think grabbing it early is vital, and it really may be catching what a child is saying before they're actually engaged in the behaviors that saves them.
That's great. And one thing I want to clarify there is I don't want anyone listening to think that we're saying parents cause eating disorders.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. But, however,
they can contribute.
A child who is more likely or a child or a young adult or whoever, in the right situation could be either supported and loved through somewhat of a tendency to lean towards that way and be fine, or in a more I don't want to say abusive, but in the environment where someone's weighing them constantly or constantly getting mad at them about making this or that choice with their food, well, that can be just enough to send them over the edge. So if you're a spouse or a parent or a loved one and you're engaging in those types of behaviors with the people around you, stop. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do it. And you're right. No one person, no one thing can cause an eating disorder. I've likened it to like the perfect storm. You have to have everything there. A coach or a parent might say one thing to another child, it's water off a duck's back. Doesn't mean a thing. That statement to a child who has those other traits, as you mentioned, maybe they're perfectionistic, they're anxious, they're driven, that comment could be a contributing factor.
Definitely.
Not causing it. It can be a contributing factor. And I do think that coaches and parents, anybody who has contact with children, they just need a little more education on language that's helpful and language that's not helpful. I'm always really glad to be able to, I'm going to be talking with a cross-country team next week of young girls, and their coach is a male, and he recognized that he feels like, boy, there's some things going on here that's not good. And he even admitted, he said, I think there are things that maybe I've said that haven't been right, like never have soft drinks during cross-country season. And so I applaud him for wanting to address this in a wise way, because he has a group of young women that could be just, right combo.
Right.
To kick into an eating disorder.
Do you want to elaborate on kind of, I know we don't have much more time, but are there some specific things that you would say, definitely say more things along this line versus this?
Yeah, I think don't talk in terms of good food, bad food. Talk in terms of health and fitness, not weight. Be careful that you aren't a weightist. It's interesting. In our culture, we don't want to be a racist or a sexist, but plenty of people are weightists. And
that's so true.
A lot of my clients will say, well, my mom and dad, like, if we're out, they always point out, and go, well, look at that. Look how big that woman is. Can you believe she's eating that ice cream cone? And, I mean, man, that resonates with those kids. And they go, oh, my goodness, maybe I shouldn't eat an ice cream cone. You want to, I think all of us need to think about how do we speak in front of children about food, eating, body images, things like that. Or some of my clients will say, well, my mom, when she's getting dressed, she always talks about how awful she looks and this doesn't fit, and if I could only move a few inches. And once again, you say that in front of someone else, no problem. A child that has just all the right makings, that could definitely be a factor. So I think just being aware and being aware how we speak about ourselves, how we treat ourselves. If we treat ourselves in a healthier, more balanced fashion and model that to children, look at, for example, exercise. Not say, well, I need to go, burn some calories, but hey, let's go for a walk. I think exercise. Several of my clients have developed some unhealthy relationships with exercise because their parents are so compulsive about their exercise, and they always talk about it in terms of burning calories and keeping their weight down or losing weight.
And this is tough because it's very counterculture to say, stop focusing on calories, stop dieting, stop being a weightist. I love that idea. I've never actually thought about it that way. And I might use that if you don't mind, and I'll give you credit.
Not
but that is such a great
Not
idea. And I just, I think another thing is just becoming, along with becoming educated, also becoming a little bit more sensitized to these issues. Maybe just sitting down and talking with someone and understanding their point of view and the way that they experience life and recognizing that might be different from the way that you internalize things. But I know for me, once I've been sensitized to these issues, I see it all day long, every day, no matter where I am. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
before I was sensitized to these issues, I would have had no idea. So
Right. Yeah.
people are going through a lot, and the little things we say and do can affect them. So I think just being a little bit more sensitive and aware of others.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Okay, I want to ask about resources. So for someone who's listening to this thinking, wow, I really need some help, we've kind of touched on this a little bit with the ideal treatment team consisting of a dietitian, a therapist, and a good doctor, which, like you mentioned, is tough. The ones that do deal with eating disorders are often very, very busy because
Mm-hmm.
they're few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
So, what other resources do you recommend besides? I mean, you did a great job kind of listing all the books that I love too. I'm going to link to orthorexia.com and some of the other books that you mentioned, along with Ellen Satter's website. Is there anything else that you would recommend in terms of resources for people who are struggling, or maybe even things to stay away from?
Yeah, probably the most. Yeah, guard. I always tell my clients, don't purposely expose yourself to things that would make you feel badly about your body or misinformation, because we get enough of that accidentally. I mean, try to check out of the grocery store without being slapped on it on either side
Totally.
by magazines about it. So I tell my clients, monitor the social media.
And let me just say about
Don't get.
that, I am not someone who's struggled with a full blown eating disorder in my life, but I find Instagram so
Mm-hmm.
triggering, like as
Yes.
opposed to other social
Yeah, I
media.
agree.
I think it's one of the worst.
I
And
do
that's
too.
not to say that there aren't good forces on Instagram. I mean, I'm on Instagram. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to fight the
Yeah.
good fight. But
Right.
I think we need to be very careful who we're following and what we're clicking on in terms of hashtags and
Yes.
profiles and pictures. That is so, so, so,
Yeah.
can be so
And I mean,
dangerous.
there's so much research that actually supports that you can take girls and women who've never even had eating disorders and expose them to 30 to 60 seconds of flash images in front of them from our popular culture, and having done a depression test and a self-esteem test before they do that, and then do it after, depression skyrockets and self-esteem plummets. And these are girls and women who really don't even have an eating disorder. So really guard what you watch and what you look at. The National Eating Disorder Association is a wonderful resource. They have great things you can download, articles, how do you support someone who's struggling. They're a wonderful resource. The Binge Eating Disorder Association is a wonderful resource for articles and links to professionals. Eating Disorder Recovery, ED Recovery, is a good resource to find professionals in your area who might treat eating disorders. You might have local organizations. Here in Nashville, we do have, well, in Tennessee, we have the Eating Disorders Coalition of Tennessee, and we list the professionals and their profiles. So there are several ways to find out if there are some professionals in the area who treat eating disorders. I am not a fan of Overeaters Anonymous for people with eating disorders. It can be very triggering. I don't really appreciate their philosophy. They come from an addictive model. However, Eating Disorders, EDA, Eating Disorders Anonymous, is in most places, peer-led support groups are going to vary, but here in town, EDA ends up being a good peer-led support group. There's some links on my website, and I can't even remember all of them. Something Fishy. Of course, there's Mentor Connect with Shannon Cutts, where you can get connected with someone who's recovered that can be supportive of you. So there are a lot of resources out there that you can access. Now, as far as I have to say insurance is not great at paying for treatment for eating disorders. And being in private practice, I don't deal directly with insurance companies. I just do my doggonest to keep my prices as reasonable as possible and go years and talking 4 and 5 years at a time without raising fees. So it's not inexpensive to get help for your eating disorder.
It's a lot cheaper to do it than inpatient, though, right?
Exactly. If you can do outpatient, by all means, try to do it outpatient.
Yeah.
And your life is worth the investment. And it's when you get out of prison, you really do see what all you were missing. Sometimes when you're entrenched, you don't have a clue because Ed has kidnapped you and blindfolded you and tied your hands behind your back. But when you get out, it's a wonderful place to live.
Yeah, thank you so much. And do you work with anybody long distance, just so that if
I do Skype and I do FaceTime with people.
Okay.
I have a client in Chicago I've never met face to face. It's kind of fun. We get to do FaceTime each week. So yes, I do, and I do supervision for dietitians who are interested in becoming more proficient in treating eating disorders.
Oh, great.
And I really love that. I love case supervision with dietitians who are starting out, because it's not something that you can just dive into. I was supervised for nearly 10 years by a local licensed clinical social worker who was one of the few people in Nashville at the time who actually treated eating disorders. And A&D, Academy for Nutrition and Dietetics, actually, the work paper that we produce supports that we need supervision as we enter into this field. So, yes, both other dietitians as well as I do have long-distance clients.
Okay, great. And I do the same, minus the dietitian supervision. I work with people long distance. I find it's a little bit more difficult. You lose a little bit in the lost in translation of not being face to face, but it's a great option if you don't feel like you have the resources right where you are. So again, your website is rebasloannutrition.com, and people can check that out along with your blogs and your great resources that you have there. And I will link to a lot of the things that you mentioned as resources just as well, to kind of give people a jump start on that. So before we close, and is there anything that you would like to add about anything we've talked about, anything I didn't ask that you'd like to mention?
No, I think you did a great job, Paige. And I would just say, don't lose hope. If you are struggling, or if you love someone who's struggling, don't lose hope. Full recovery does exist. It's worth fighting for. And it's a tug of war, but if you lay your end of the rope down, Ed wins. So you have to stay engaged in the battle, and it's so worth it, even though it's such a tough haul when you're in the midst of it.
And there are people willing to help you down that path who
absolutely
have the skills and the tools necessary to help you do so. So reach out, ask for help, whether it's uncomfortable or not comfortable, it's worth it. And like you said, what was that number you said? It was at least 2 years up till 10 for full recovery.
2 to 10. So you have to be patient, and if you have a lapse, it doesn't mean collapse. You just have to keep after it, because it's like a hammer and chisel approach versus the bulldozer approach that the diet mentality tells us. Whatever I'm doing today, by tomorrow I'll have my ducks in a row. No, it's more hammer and chisel. You just have to stay after it.
Well, Reba, are you going to write a book for dietitians? Because I think you should.
Oh, I have one in my head. Jenny always laughs when I tell her I have a book in my head. She's like, it doesn't do any good having it in your head.
No, it really doesn't. You got to get that down on paper.
Well, maybe you're the impetus, Paige. We'll see.
Well, if I am, that would be an honor, and I will definitely pick that up when you get it out.
You'll buy a copy? All right. Good deal.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you again so much for taking the time to do this. I'm hoping that this can be a great resource for people to reference as they need it. And you're doing great work. And let me know if there's anything you ever need from me.
Well, thank you, Paige, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.